Presentation by Cecile Wimberley. Second Harvest Food Bank, you'll hear a little bit more about her, but this is the legacy or legislation and advocacy section or pillar of the United Rise. As you know, the League of Women Voters is nonpartisan. We keep reminding ourselves of that. It's getting harder and harder to be, to remain nonpartisan, but we are a nonpartisan organization. We do not support parties nor listed political candidates. However, that doesn't mean that we're apolitical or neutral, that we're not active. We are very active on policies and issues. I'll show you a couple here in a minute. I'll set some more recent. If you guys take a look at the League of Women Voters US website, a lot of stuff that's going on listed. So those of you who are members, thank you, because your membership helps support some of these issues that we actually pursue. Like this one, we've got the Win for Oregonians. There's a lot of voter suppression out there right now, and the League of Women Voters usually partners with ACLU or others to make sure that voters' rights, as well as access to voting rights, are maintained. So here's two listed particularly with the Mormon Church. You can see we'll partner wherever it makes sense to make sure that we defend democracy and people's right to vote. The educational program that we do is really the nonpartisan educational content like today. It's supported by our Ed Fund, which is the 501c3 portion of our state league. This particular program is supported through that. The other work that we do, more of the advocacy, is typically through what our organization is, which is 501c4. I do want to call out, since we mentioned advocacy today, I'd like to recognize Lee Clements. He'll stand Lee. Lee is heading up our advocacy committee. We decided this year it needed to have some focused attention. We got a lot going on. So if you guys would like to get involved with the advocacy committee, see Lee. She has a lot of handouts, so we'd encourage you guys to take some of those things that you can do now. Just a phone call or many phone calls to our legislators, like on the SAVE Act, and some of the local advocacy guys that you guys can take part in. Okay, upcoming events. Members only. Okay, this is one of the perks of being a member. The State Advocacy Committee meets each Friday, at 1 o'clock p.m. You have to pre-register for this, but Lee is working on a way to try to disseminate some of that information in case you guys cannot join, of what the top and critical issues are at the state level. Observer Corps. Dave Bolrath couldn't be with us today, but Dave has worked tirelessly to develop a real relationship with the Election Commission. I think Becky has worked in the past with him as well. We're trying to expand that, trying to figure out how. So if you guys are interested in being an Observer Corps, you don't even have to do it in person. You can do a lot of these from your home because they're live streamed. Things like the county commissions. There's a lot going on in Washington County and Sullivan County as well that's decided at the county commission level. Same thing with the Board of Education. A lot of these are live streamed. So observer corps, to make sure there's transparency, make sure that you observe, hey, they posted this in time for people to know about it. Those are the kind of things that sort of help them, but also help make sure that they have the integrity that we need in transparency. There is a membership interest survey. Those of you who are members, I sent one out on February 3rd. I'm going to send it out again. Really, really need you guys, okay, to step up, to help. Let us know what your passion is, what your interest is. There's some at the back. I'll make sure that they're put out there for members if you want to go old school and do out the hard copy form. But really, it would help us if you could do with the online. Just watch for the next email that I'll send out this week. Now, open to all. They haven't announced the topic yet, but the League of Women Voters of Tennessee does an excellent series each month. The last one was on LGBTQ plus rights and the issues that they face in Tennessee and nationally. They haven't announced the next one yet, but just watch the League of Women Voters Tennessee website for the announcement on that one. Lunch with the League. Bob and Noel couldn't be with us today, but they have agreed to host the next one. We had a fantastic one that Frankie and Ed hosted this last week at the Black Olive. But this is really just a time to come together, still maintaining nonpartisan principles, but just to talk about things and to get to know each other. So the next one will be, let's see, on March the 10th, the Bristol Cafe and Market. It's right there next to the Speedway. And please join us, even if you can't RSVP because you don't know your plans far enough in advance. It's okay, come anyway. We try to make room for everybody. The March program is the next one. Go ahead and give that one March the 22nd at 2 o'clock. Focus will be on county government, structure, services, and citizen impact. Pretty sure Cecile will probably touch on some of that today. So it will, yeah, a lot of that today. So it will be a good preface, like I said, for next month's meeting. Okay. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize, and sorry guys, I forgot the cake, but yesterday was the 106th anniversary of the League of Women Voters. So typically this day is, yeah, woohoo, yeah, happy birthday. But typically this has been a day of action, advocacy, as well as education, and what better way to combine both of those in today's meeting. So again, happy birthday, League. We live stream on Facebook, as you can see up here. Listen, Julia has graciously, she's our videographer. Listen, so we live stream. Stay out of the picture. Your voice, if you have a really recognizable voice, that's the only thing that may be heard on there. But we do post this on YouTube later, probably in about 3 or 4 days. So it'll be on YouTube for those people. If you find this really engaging, encourage your friends to watch it there. Refreshments are in the back. Help yourself. Donations are welcome. 1/3 of our budget for this league goes to this facility and refreshments. So anything you can pitch in would be appreciated. Restrooms in the back behind the wall there, behind the counter. They've got lots of take-home handouts, especially on advocacy. Encourage, if you've got some friends that you think might be interested, take a couple of extra, okay, and get them involved. Come at 1:30 in March. We try, unless we're running around like chickens with our heads cut off, we try to socialize. If you come at 1:30, get to meet some people, let's put names with faces, but the program will start at 2 o'clock. Okay, with that said, Cecile has graciously offered to provide a PDF of her presentation after the fact, so you guys can really engage with your ears and listen, look her in the eye, the whites of the eyes there. And we'll send the information along with her contact info if there's any follow-up questions today after the meeting. But Cecile, I told her I was really surprised that we hadn't run into each other. Our scout troop, my grandson's scout troop, does a lot with Second Harvest Food Bank, scouting for food, so an incredible organization if you're not familiar with that one. But Cecile is the advocacy manager. So she keeps up with policies, legislation that's going to affect those who have food insecurity in our area and beyond. So she tracks and analyzes those federal and state, advocates for programs that address food insecurity. Be interested to see, I'm sure she's going to mention the summer EBT program.
There may be a slide.
Yeah, okay, good. She has her BA in history and political science from Lipscomb University in Nashville, and JD from the University of Tennessee College of Law. Go Vols, okay, listen, so I'm a big Vol fan. She's the corresponding Secretary General of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and she's super active. She still has kids, very active in scouting the community. Big Dobbins Bennett band supporter. Again, my grandson's also a that, so go DB. Roll Tide. Right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Cecile. So let's welcome Cecile.
Get kind of set up here. Hopefully you can hear me. Get mine. And technology is amazing, and during COVID I've learned how to Zoom from my house to people, and but it only works if it's going to work. So let me see if I can figure out how to hook this to my back so I'm not carrying it around. Okay, can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay, because I like to walk and talk. I don't like to necessarily be behind the computer the whole time. As you've heard, I'm with Second Harvest Food Bank of Northeast Tennessee. And as a 501c3 nonprofit, we are also nonpartisan and non-political in what we do. However, we do feel that there's a need to train citizen advocates because you know the issues that are impacting you and your families and your community. So while today's program will have some legislative pieces that you can advocate for or against, we just want to be very mindful that we're not promoting any particular party or any particular candidate with this legislation pieces that we're discussing and advocacy techniques. So as you may or may not know, Second Harvest Food Bank of Northeast Tennessee covers the 8 most northern counties. Along with 4 other food banks in Tennessee, we actually cover every single county in Tennessee with Feeding America coverage. As such, we are covering the upper 3,000-ish square miles of Northeast Tennessee, and we cover these 8 counties. So I think these are probably a lot of the counties that you're serving with the Northeast League of Women Voters. And we're going to really talk about the elected officials for these 8 counties. So if you perhaps are joining us from somewhere else in Northeast Tennessee, before the end of the day, you're going to figure out how to find your elected official as well. All right, so why is advocacy important? Why does it make a difference? Okay, anybody want to answer? Anybody got a clue?
It makes a difference.
It does, that's exactly right. And here's the deal, and I do move around, I'm sorry. When elected officials are in Nashville or when they're in Washington, they're going to make decisions, whether or not we reach out to them. So our voices are really important because we want them to know what's going to impact our families, our communities, our neighbors, the people we serve. And the only way they're going to know that is if we reach out and we tell them what is going on in Northeast Tennessee. So it's incredibly important. And as I told some of our neighbors that we were doing a training with recently, sometimes it may feel like one voice gets lost. But when you're joined with a second voice, a third voice, a 5th voice, a 10th voice, you start to be heard in the masses. And so that's why it's really important that you advocate for yourself, but you advocate for others to join you in the work that you're doing. So we're going to talk a little bit about various ways you can advocate, and then we'll talk about who you can advocate to. So when we talk about advocacy efforts at the food bank, we typically group these into these 5 buckets: grassroots, grass tops, community engagement, engaging with elected officials, and media. And so I wanted to start by talking about some advocacy efforts in each one of these buckets so that you can kind of be thinking about ways you can utilize the methods that are available to you when we're talking about various pieces of legislation or policy efforts. And when we start talking about elected officials, at the end of the day, all of these can influence an elected official as well. So let's start with grassroots and grass tops. Who's ever heard of the term grass tops before? Yeah, I thought it was made up. But it's not. So grassroots are the folks that are doing the work on the ground level. So like at Feeding America or Second Harvest, they are the people that are coming out to our space to help pack the boxes. They're the folks that are going out to meet the trucks and help distribute. They're the folks with the boots on the ground, okay? Grass tops are the same kind of people, but they may be reaching elected officials. A grass top individual might be someone that goes to church with an elected official. It might be the spouse of an elected official. It's someone that you can talk to that might have, you've heard of Kevin Bacon's 7 degrees of separation. Okay, a grass top individual may have 1 degree of separation. Grassroots may have 2 or 3, or maybe 7. But you see what I'm saying? They're just the people that have a little bit closer connection. And that's important that we think about both grassroots and grass tops, because we may not know that our best friend is a grass tops advocate for someone. But they may have the ear of someone that can change policy at the local level, the county level, the state level, or even the federal level. So one of the things you can do is share your experiences with your circles. Tell people in your family, tell people that you go to church with, encourage all of these individuals to reach out and talk to people about what's going on. Additionally, talk to them about following the news and reaching out then to elected officials when they hear about policy issues that impact them. Now, I always like to touch on the news when we're talking about grassroots and grass tops. There's a lot of news out there that's fake. Okay, we all know that. So when you are looking online, think about the news and media sources. Being mindful that they may be skewed one way or the other, and you may not be getting the full picture. So delve down into your news media sources to make sure you're getting the root story of whatever policy or legislation you're looking at, and that way you'll know that you're advocating for what's really going on. Okay, so that's grassroots and grass tops, and that's just sharing what you know with the people around you. All right, let's talk about community engagement. These may be people that you don't really know, but you see them. This is engaging the people downstairs in the Food City today. How are you going to reach out to them? Well, there's a lot of things that you can do. You can start attending town halls. Now, granted, we've not seen as many town halls in the last 18 months as we have been having, but when and if we start seeing those again, please invite your friends to go. When you stand up and ask a question, you're also helping educate other people in the room that you would have never talked to before because you don't know them. So that's a great way to educate the community around you, is through a town hall. Or perhaps, if you have groups of people meeting, you can encourage groups that may not necessarily be in your inner circle, but just like this. I would hope everyone in here, in this meeting today, you have additional groups that you interact with. You may not be best friends with them, but you may be in clubs. You may be playing cards with folks. You may have a bridge club, or you may have a DAR function or something, and you can talk to them about policies when you see other individuals and help get them involved as well. All right, media. Now, there's several ways we can engage the media. You can always write. We still have newspapers. You can always write letters to the editor. That's a great way to share with the media what's going on. Sometimes, if you get involved in some of these other groups that we're going to talk about today with newsletters and other kinds of outreach, sometimes other groups will ask you to write op-ed pieces on behalf of maybe an organization, on behalf of yourself. If you're asked to do that, don't be afraid. Do it. Share your opinion. There's a reason why that group has asked you to share your opinion with the media. You can do press releases and talk about upcoming events and send those out to TV stations and ask them to come and cover events that you might be having. As the League of Women Voters, you can always do some sort of event where you invited elected officials to do a town hall yourself. That might be an option, and invite the media to come and cover that event. And probably the most accessible media we have is social media. You can post things on your Facebook page. You can cross-post things. I'm sure that there are newsletters from the National League of Women Voters website. They probably have a social media page that you can cross-post things about elections. But there's also a slew of other media sources out there. If you're interested in food insecurity, like Feeding America and Second Harvest are handling, we both have websites and social media sites where you can cross-post things that we're talking about. When we have legislation that is really important to us, we will put that on our social media page, and we love it when people share those things, because when our social media pages are shared out, the more shares, the more likely it will be picked up by mainstream media that might want to do a story on it. So it's all kind of interconnected. Okay, now when we talk about elected officials, all these other buckets sort of get at these folks. And they all, at all three of these levels, federal, state, and local, are incredibly important individuals to work with. They all deal with separate issues. Sometimes they all come together on one kind of policy that all three levels are going to be working on together. In some cases, some things are very focused. Some things are very local. Some things are very state-oriented. or federally oriented. So it's why it's really important that you think about these folks as well. And remember that weird thing we talked about, those grass tops? Well, our local elected officials, little feedback, our local elected officials are grass tops for our state and federal. Just like our state elected officials are grass tops to our federal elected officials. So again, when you advocate at the local level, it can go up all the way to the federal level depending on the topic at hand. And we'll talk about a good example of that here in just a minute. All right, so when we talk about federal advocacy and talking to our elected officials at the federal level, we're going to do federal, state, and then local today. And so you're going to get some tips and tricks for all three levels. And as we talk about them, I want you to think about those advocacy buckets. How can you utilize maybe the media or community engagement to reach out to federal folks? How can you use those same tools to reach out to local folks? So keep that in mind as we go through these buckets. Federal advocacy is a little bit different than state advocacy in that we have administrative advocacy and legislative advocacy year-round. Now, we'll talk more about the difference with state in just a minute, but when we talk about federal administrative advocacy, that's when we're going to a department. Like if you're going to the USDA and trying to talk to the secretary about a particular food and nutrition bill that's being considered, or if you go to the Department of Transportation and talk to them about a bill they might be considering. There's a lot of actions that take place and a lot of decisions that take place administratively that never see the floor of Congress. And you still can talk about those things. That was one of the things that Ramsey asked me to touch on today. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But that can happen year-round, all right? And a lot of times you will hear about these things when you work with federal partners and federal agencies, or like I'm trying to think of like Feeding America. A lot of times we'll have action items around the USDA programs. But there are a lot of other things, like the Department of Education. There are going to be groups in Tennessee and nationally that are going to be lifting up administrative actions you can take around the Department of Education. This is another example. Legislative advocacy is what you're going to do regarding elected officials in Congress, our U.S. Senate and our U.S. House folks. And that, again, at the federal level is going on year-round. Now, it's important to note, like, for example, this week they're on a break. But their staff is still in D.C. They're still answering phone calls, they're still answering emails, and both our U.S. representative and both of our U.S. senators have staff here in the local Tri-Cities where you can set up meetings with their field reps. And so if you have a personal issue that they can help you with or a policy issue, you can reach out to them even if they're not meeting in D.C., or even if they're in D.C., there's local folks you can be talking to. So when we're looking at a federal level legislative advocacy effort, that can be going on year-round as well. And that's what's different between Tennessee, because Tennessee has some uniqueness around when they meet that we'll get into in just a minute. So these are two websites I want you to know about. And you are going to get a copy of this presentation after the fact, so you don't have to write anything down. But these are your magic websites. There is one for the House, there is one for the Senate. And you don't have to go to D.C. to know a thing that's going on. You can use these two websites to follow floor votes, to follow committee hearings, to learn who your elected officials are, and to see what legislation they are carrying and the votes that they have cast. And that's what is great about these two websites. If you want to see what's going on in a hearing for the Department of Transportation, you can log on and find out. You can register for committees to send you their agendas and their calendars. For example, I get the calendars for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And I know when they're having meetings in the House and in the Senate. And I can log on and watch and see everything that's said about a piece of legislation. So these are magic because you can see real time, You do not have to depend on, NBC, ABC, CBS to tell you what happened. You can find out for yourself. And that is what is so important, because this allows you to learn exactly what's going on. So I want you to bookmark these on your computer, because these are your gateway to what's going on at the federal level. Now, I did want to give you a few updates on some federal things going on. You may be aware we're in a shutdown. How many knew we were in a shutdown? Okay, good. But it's partial. That's exactly right. It's only really impacting a portion of one department. That's going to be your TSA officers, your Coast Guard. A lot of the other enforcement officers were already funded under a different avenue. So it's important to note when certainly a food bank is talking about a shutdown, what does it mean for our food insecure individuals? And thankfully, during the November shutdown that ended, they took care of the food insecurity issues around SNAP. That was taken off the table. It was funded. WIC was funded. So right now, we're not concerned about food insecure individuals. However, we are concerned about Coast Guard members, TSA agents, the individuals that may not get paid because of a partial government shutdown. They are individuals that will start coming to our food banks and may need to see help from their communities, depending on how long this goes on. So I did want to make that clear, because every time there's a shutdown, that is usually a question we get. And in fact, Saturday morning, Feeding America sent all the food banks an email out to say, please remember, this is not going to impact your food insecure individuals, but you may need to start having boxes for these government officials and government employees that may not be getting paid. Okay, some other federal legislation to watch. I know you all know about the SAVE Act. It did pass through the House, but as you know, the same version in the House has to pass in the Senate for it to become law. So if there's even one line of those two bills that don't match up, it doesn't pass. They have to be the same or go together in a conference committee to work out a joint bill. So right now, if you are for the SAVE Act or against the SAVE Act, either way, now is your time to reach out to the Senate, to Senator Blackburn and to Senator Haggerty, because they are the ones next up to vote on that particular piece of legislation. And it has to be the same thing that the House passed too, which is important. Okay, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the Farm Bill. And I talk about the Farm Bill all the time. It was supposed to pass in 2023, and it sounds like it should just be about farmers. And in a lot of ways it is about farmers. But about 80% of the Farm Bill actually is the framework for SNAP and for a program called TFAP, which is the Emergency Food Assistance Program. That's how food banks like Second Harvest actually buy the food that we put out onto a lot of the mobile trucks and that we give out to a lot of pantries. This bill keeps getting kind of kicked down the road, and so we're in 2026 and it still has not been passed. So we're hoping later this year. There have been thoughts that it might get passed in February, but unfortunately there were some changes to the House Ag Committee due to some folks that had rolled off that committee, and so they're a little bit behind now in that process. So we're hoping in 2026, because this is a really important piece of legislation for food banks to help feed folks through our region. Okay, another piece of legislation I would love for you to advocate on is this bill called the Hot Foods Act of 2025. And this sounds crazy, but under SNAP, you can't purchase hot food. So you can purchase a cold, uncooked chicken with your SNAP benefits, but you cannot cook a hot, cooked rotisserie chicken. And a lot of families don't have the ability to cook chickens or other products. And if you can purchase them hot and already cooked, think about our seniors that may not have the ability to cook meals anymore. How great it would be if they could use SNAP benefits to purchase a chicken that's already cooked for them. So this is Senate Bill 1202, House Resolution 2512, and that would actually allow SNAP purchases of hot foods like rotisserie chicken. So this is a really important one for food bankers and for your neighbors that may need this. Okay, so in the slide deck, you're going to have the contact information for the federal folks, your state folks, and the local folks until we have an election, because there's a lot of folks up for re-election this year. But you will have the contact information for your 2 senators and for Diana Harshbarger, representative. Now, I told you I was going to talk a little bit about federal administrative advocacy as well. And this is important because there's something called a public comment period. This is when an administrative agency is going to make a change. And it's not going to be done legislatively, it's going to be done in-house. And they want to make sure there is some pieces of the code that indicate the public needs to be allowed to have the opportunity to speak on these actions. And so there's actually a website called regulations.gov, and you can go to that website and you can see all the public comments for federal level department agency changes that are currently up for discussion. And a lot of times you may hear about public comment. There was, several years ago, there was something called public charge. It was about how social programs were handled for immigrant populations, and they were changing it not through legislation, but they were changing it through administrative change. And there was about a 90-day window where individuals could make public comment about those regulations. And when you sign up for a lot of these websites and a lot of the newsletters, they're going to tell you when these opportunities are arising around certain pieces of legislation. But I went on there to look for you fine folks, and this is what a screenshot of what that website looks like. This one is actually about Sunshine Acts, and it was posted by the Election Assistance Commission on February the 2nd of this year, and it closes on February the 17th of this year. So you have time this week to look up what, there might be some election laws that are being discussed. This is open meetings, but there's a lot of different things. A lot of departments have lots of different things. So you can put search terms in on that page and find lots of different agency actions that might be of interest to you and folks that you know. Okay, one example of administrative change that we've seen is something that the USDA determined they were no longer going to collect the food insecurity data any longer. They had collected it through 2024, and they released it at the end of December of 2025, but have indicated they are no longer going to collect that data and release it anymore. And that really is one of the ways that we track food insecurity and poverty throughout the nation. So this is one of those areas, this would be an administrative thing you could write to the USDA about. Even if it's not during a public comment period, you could reach out to elected officials and ask them to have this report reinstated, because it is something that really does show a snapshot of the entire United States and where our country is at with hunger and food nutrition issues. Okay, this is sort of a group of resources I think are amazing. And I don't want to be a gatekeeper. I want you to know about them because they're really, really good. So when I talk about those media sources that are neutral, thehill.com and rollcall.com are two fairly neutral ones that try to show everything that's going on. They have websites. You can sign up for different all kinds of different newsletters about different areas you're interested in. I think I've signed up for every single one of them because I get like every day my email is blowing up. There's like a 12:30. I don't know why they think 12:30 is an important time to give me an update, but they always have one at 12:30. But those are two really good ones about politics in general in DC and tracking legislative things going on at both the legislative side and administrative side of policy making. If you're into podcast, who likes a good podcast? Yeah, okay. So here's some podcasts for you. There's one called CQ Morning Briefing. It's done by roll call, and it's usually less than 5 minutes. It kind of tells you what to expect for the day to come. There's another one called Roll Call Policy and Politics. These are deeper dives. They're usually between anywhere between 20 minutes to maybe 15 minutes on a particular topic. And then there's the Congressional Record and Daily Digest. This is it's actually billed as being less than 5 minutes, and is going to tell you about what happened the day before. So that's when you can find out what actually got a vote and what passed and what maybe was, what failed in a particular committee or on the floor of the House and the Senate. So these are some that I think are really important. Another way you can keep up with things is advocacy newsletters for groups that are of interest to you. So if you are interested in housing concerns, the Urban Institute is a great one for a lot of policy issues. If you're into reporting, the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, they do a lot of things on social programs like SNAP and WIC and housing. There's a lot of groups out there, and you can sign up for their newsletters. And a lot of times, those newsletters will tell you when there's an advocacy opportunity, whether it be legislatively or administratively, to reach out and to do maybe a call-in day or to just know more about what's going on. But some of them will have call-in day programs. FRAC, which is the Food Research Action Center, they've been having call-in days around a lot of different food nutrition things. During the government shutdown, when we had individuals that did not have SNAP benefits coming in, they had call-in days to call your elected officials and tell them how it was impacting your neighbors, and to try to really explain what the real boots on the ground look to hunger looked like during those times. So a lot of these groups will have it when there's something coming up before the House or the Senate for a vote. Okay. Any questions about federal advocacy? I'm going to check my phone for time. Y'all have any questions? Okay, I've either bored you or I'm answering all the questions as I go. I don't know. Feel free to interrupt me as well if you have any questions. Let's talk a little bit about state advocacy. Now, as I mentioned, state advocacy is different than federal advocacy in the timing. Administratively, it's the same. Year-round, we've got agencies that are making decisions year-round. There are opportunities to talk to decision makers. But what makes legislation different in Tennessee versus the federal government is we are time constrained. There's a time constraint to when our Tennessee General Assembly can actually vote on bills. And this is kind of a unique thing that we have going on in Tennessee. I'll just quickly explain it now. There's another slide that goes into a little bit more in depth. But we have 90 days over 2 years. And so that's why you typically see from January to April, most legislation in Tennessee being passed. And why you see them going out around May sometime. So we started this legislative General Assembly in January of 2025. And they used, we'll say approximately 45 days. I don't think it was quite 45 days because they had a special session to talk about vouchers. And so that was set aside from their normal 90 days. That was just a special session to talk about one topic. Okay, so they adjourned, and all the bills that didn't pass in 2025 that are still alive and kicking, maybe they're still in a committee, whatever, they're still alive. They don't have to be reintroduced in January of 26. But there's a whole bunch of other bills that have been introduced in 26. So they'll have another, say, 45 days. They started on the 13th of January of 26 for that second window. They have a whole bunch of new bills that they're going to consider. But then there's some bills they can reconsider from the first half. And we'll talk a little bit about those in a minute. But let's talk about administrative advocacy. This is the stuff you can do year-round. Of course, administrative advocacy is really when you're talking about going to like the governor or to a commissioner, the commissioner of education, the commissioner of human services, the commissioner of health and resources. Those are the folks that you're wanting to look at for administrative advocacy efforts. Now, as you know, this is an election year, and we will be electing a new governor. And one of the things I would highly encourage you to do, after the election, go to the governor-elect's website. It'll probably be a campaign website. But one of the things that we were able to utilize at the food bank was Governor Lee had posted on his campaign website a portal for Tennesseans to tell him what issues they found of import. Like what as a Tennessean do I want the governor to focus on? What would I like him to consider? And we put in that we wanted Mrs. Lee to consider child nutrition. And while she didn't focus on child nutrition, she picked volunteerism, which is still great for our food bank and great for all nonprofits. She still came out to our food bank and toured it right after he was inaugurated. And then she has done several food distributions with us. And a lot of that is because we reached out on the front end and asked them to consider those issues. So I would encourage you to look for a portal like that after the election and put in policy areas that you think might benefit Northeast Tennessee for consideration. So another thing I will say is some of those administrative commissioners may roll over into the next administration. Sometimes they change, sometimes they don't. So work that you might be doing with, like, let's say Commissioner Carter with the Department of Human Services, you may open up a door to continue depending on who is the commissioner in the next administration. It may be Commissioner Carter, or it may be an assistant commissioner that's already working with him. All right, so let's talk a little bit about legislative advocacy. And so, like I said, we're going to be seeing a lot of new bills discussed. When we talk about this General Assembly, right now our Senate has 33 senators in Tennessee. Right now the makeup is 27 Republicans and 6 Democrats. They are elected for 4-year terms, and their re-election cycles are staggered. So we don't re-elect all 33 at the same time. We'll elect half of them this term, this year, and then in 2 years we'll elect the other half. For the House of Representatives, we have 99. So it's 3 times as many people. And that's good because we have 95 counties. So that gives a little bit more representation across the state. And when we look at the makeup of this House of Representatives, we have 75 Republicans and 24 Democrats. And all of these individuals will be reelected this year. They are all up for reelection if they choose to be up for reelection. We actually have one representative that will not be seeking reelection, and that's Bud Halsey. So his seat will turn over because he's not running again. You know how I told you we had that magic federal website? Guess what? We have a magic Tennessee website too. And it's great. I will tell you, there have been many times I've wanted to see what was going on in a committee hearing around a bill. We're 4.5 hours away. It does not make sense for this little food banker to drive to Nashville every time a bill might be heard. Because a lot of times it gets on the calendar and it gets moved because they take too long, somebody else needs the room. They don't always hear the bill the day you think they're going to hear it. So this magic website is your portal to Tennessee. You can use this website to put in your zip code and find out exactly who your representative is and exactly who your senator is. You can find out every piece of legislation they are sponsoring, every piece of legislation they're co-sponsoring. And you can see what's going on in all the different committees in the House and the Senate. They're live streamed. And then they're archived. So you can, if they end, let's say at 3 o'clock, you might not be able to watch it at 3:05, but usually by the end of the day, a couple of hours later, they'll have that video archived. If you're, you may have something else you need to do that day and you want to go back and watch it. So this is a great thing. You can watch the floor votes for the full House and the floor votes for the full Senate, and you can hear their debates. And so again, this is a great way to find out what happened real time and see exactly what happened. You don't have to wait for someone to report it. You don't have to wait to see what your friends on Facebook say about it. You can learn straight from the horse's mouth what happened that day. So bookmark this one too. Okay, so we have some bills, of course, that I think you might find of interest. The first one is a school meals bill. It is House Bill 1153, Senate Bill 740. This one is my pride and joy, and I want to see this one pass, so I need all of your help. This actually is a bill that would remove the reduced price category of school meals, allowing those children to have a free meal. This is a great bill for families on the cusp of poverty. They just make a little bit too much maybe to have those federal benefits and to really, to get full free lunch for their kids. And while, a savings of maybe $30 a month may not sound like a lot to us, that's huge for a family that could use $30 to buy rice and beans and pantry staples to feed the rest of their family for the month. So we're really excited about this bill. I'm also incredibly proud of the Northeast delegation. Of our 12 folks, our 4 senators all have signed on. Representative Bobby Harshbarger is our Senate sponsor. We were thrilled when he agreed to do that for us. We were at 9th hour trying to find a Senate sponsor, and he agreed to do it last year. And all but one of our representatives for Northeast Tennessee has signed on as a House co-sponsor of the bill. And our one holdout is Representative Hicks. So if he's, hi Representative Hicks, I want you to sign on if you're watching this. And it would really help a lot of families. It does have a fiscal note, but it's less than $3 million, and to provide free meals to all of those children in that category, that's a huge, huge benefit for families in Tennessee. Can you tell I'm passionate about this bill? Now, I never give up a chance to talk about it. Summer EBT, yes.
Is that separate from the summer?
Yes, it is, completely separate. Summer EBT feeds the children when they're not in school. And it used to be that summer feeding programs had to be fed to children in a congregate feeding scenario. And what that means is you have to bring children together and watch them eat the food for it to count and have USDA reimbursements. During COVID, we found that it could be tremendously successful to do non-congregate feeding, that it could work, it could feed kids. And so summer EBT sort of grew out of pilot programs that actually started pre-COVID that were successful. Tennessee had some pilot programs. And summer EBT then is a card that is loaded for each child. And so if a child doesn't have access to a congregate feeding site or to a school after-school program, a lot of the after-school programs run summer programs too, like Boys and Girls Clubs or Girls Inc. If they can't get to those programs because there aren't school buses running in the summer, then these EBT cards will allow families to purchase up to $120 worth of groceries. The same guidelines apply to summer EBT as regular SNAP, and it allows families to purchase good, nutritious food for kids during the summer. So, summer EBT today is the deadline. We don't know if the governor will sign on or not. As of January 1, the first big deadline, at the end of the year, he had not signed on. He was still saying he was going to utilize his summer EBT program, which is instead of covering all 95 counties, which the federal program would do, the governor's program last year covered 15 counties. Yes, and it was for about the same amount of money administratively. He could have had all the children fed. So one of the things we've asked for, and again, I'm tremendously proud of every mayor in Northeast Tennessee that we cover. All 8 county mayors signed on to a letter asking the governor to please accept the USDA summer feeding program. So today is the deadline. We'll probably see in the news tomorrow what the final decision was. But they had to have their plans submitted to the USDA by today if Tennessee was going to be in that group for 2026. There is legislation that is pending though. There has been legislation that's been filed that would require the administration to apply for and participate in any federal summer feeding program like summer EBT that Tennessee would be eligible for in the future. So what that means is if that bill passed, it would compel any governor in the future to sign up for summer EBT for all 95 counties. And I will say of the 15 counties, only 2 in Northeast Tennessee were deemed to be eligible for the program last summer, and Hancock County was not one of them. We did our job a little too good. We had 3 summer sites, and it was my understanding if you had 3 sites or more, you would not be considered for last year's summer program. So, boo us. No. But this is something where we need your voices for summer 27. If it doesn't happen for summer 26, this piece of legislation would be huge for Tennessee if we could secure moving forward that we would always be eligible to have that program. So again, this bill is 1835 in the House, Senate Bill 1911, and actually Representative Hill from this region is currently a co-sponsor of the House bill, and Senator Harshbarger is the Senate co-sponsor. So we do have some folks from Northeast Tennessee that are pushing for this bill, and we're tremendously grateful for their support. It's also really important when we talk about this bill that for approximately every $1 in SNAP, Feeding America says that's like $1.50 back into the economy. So when we turn down a program that would put money into all 95 counties, that is turning away an economic benefit for 80 of those counties because we're not providing that additional economic benefit. So this is a huge one and one I hope you'll watch. I did put some food tax bills in there. We see food tax exemptions every year. There's one for just sales tax on retail food and food ingredients. There's one for a sales tax holiday for seniors 65 and older. There's one that would remove the sales tax on food ingredients on the 5th of every month. Don't know where they came up with that, but hey, that'd be great. I would do all my grocery shopping on the 5th of the month. There's one that would reduce sales taxes on food from 4 to 2%, and one that would exempt the sale of fresh fruits and vegetables. So you can see, you just say food tax and you think there might just be one way to look at it. No, they have figured out a ton of ways to look at it. And so all of these would be tremendously helpful to all of us because we do have a fairly high tax rate. Okay, I did want to put in some voter bills for you all since this is your focus. Senate Bill 367, House Bill 458 would make changes regarding voter registration, absentee and early voting, and voter identification. And Senate Bill 831, House Bill 1159 also talks about voter registration and designation of political parties for primaries. So it's important to note there's also a House Joint Resolution being proposed for a constitutional amendment. What's really important to note, a lot of times you may see a bill and it may have a caption that seems very, that's just a report. But what's important to note is anytime a bill opens up a piece of legislation in our code, if it opens up the Tennessee Code annotated, it can be amended to anything under that piece of code. So that's important because we call those caption bills. And they may look like they wouldn't do very much at all, or they may sound great because they're going to do a report. Everybody would want to know what the report's about. But that may actually be a caption bill that might do something completely different than what is noted in the language on the website. So that's why it's really important to look for amendments when you're on our magical website. You can look for amendments on there too. All right, and again, you're going to have all of our contact folks. I like to make it as simple as I can. That's Bud Halsey. He's the one that's not running again, so we will have someone new for District 2. But you'll have all their contact information as well as you move forward. But I wanted to give you some state update websites that you can use because I think these are some areas that you might find of interest. Tennessee Justice, they spoke to you in November or October of last year. They do a lot of things around Medicaid, Medicare, food and nutrition bills. They really do a lot of webinars that are a great educational resource. So I would suggest you sign up for their newsletters because they will talk a lot about call-in days for both federal and state legislation and administrative action. Then the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth, you can sign up on their website for a bill list of every bill they deem to impact children and youth in Tennessee. And they do that every year. And it was a tremendous resource for us at the food bank because they cover everything from education bills, judiciary bills, anything that might impact kids, they're going to put on their bill list. The Sycamore Institute is great. They do a lot of reporting. They, in the next 2 weeks or so, they're going to actually break down the governor's budget. They're going to have a webinar where they're going to tell you what is happening in his budget plans and break it down for you. So that's a huge one to be looking at. And then Ed Trust. They have a lot of newsletter information that comes out. I just got one over the weekend that broke down some bills they were wanting everyone to watch, and they have webinars as well. If you, again, from a podcast, folks, you may think Farm Bureau on the Hill might be a weird podcast, but it's great because even though they do talk about farm, we're in a rural area. And so when they're talking about farm families and farming, that's about legislation that really impacts a lot of people around us and our neighbors. So one of the reasons why I like this podcast and the TBA's Legislative Updates podcast is they also are telling you what's going on in Nashville. They're both done by the lobbyists for those organizations. The Tennessee Bar Association is the TBA one, so they're going to be looking at more of the things around the judiciary. But they're going to also tell you what's going on. And they'll say, oh, well, we're going to be out next week for snow or, this, or they're going to have a holiday. I will tell you, TBA talks a lot about Big Shrimp Day on the Hill. I think they serve really big shrimp at their legislative event, and I kind of want to go now. But anyway. And then Tennessee Today is a very unique podcast because it is hosted and produced by Senator Bo Watson, who is the Senate Finance Chair. So if you want a window into what the Senate Finance Chair thinks is important in Tennessee, he actually, a recent podcast, interviewed the House Speaker, Cameron Sexton, and they talked a lot about his philosophy toward funding. It's been very interesting. So I would encourage you to look at that podcast as well. Okay. Questions about state advocacy? All right. I know I was told to be done no later than 3:30, but we're going to wrap it up pretty soon. All right. Nothing on the state. We're going to move to local government. And so you have two options when we're talking about local. We're talking about our cities and our counties. And I wanted you to have these websites because, again, depending on where you live, you can look up various information. But when you're talking about the county level, you can advocate to the mayor, your county commissions, your school boards. Same thing with the city. If you've got a city school board, you've got those mayor and alderman groups and the mayor. So these are all buckets, little feedback, all buckets of advocacy you can do right here on the local level. And remember, these local folks, they're grass tops, okay? I've got your county government websites in the deck as well, so you'll have those. And again, all of the county mayors to date, until we have an election now, in Sullivan County, you may have heard that Mayor Venable is not going to run again, so we will have a new mayor. But I did want to give you their contact information. And again, with the local government, when we're looking at cities, I've got some city websites for you as well. So there's a lot of areas you can advocate. You can use these 5 buckets at all levels. There's all kinds of policy things that you can be working on year-round. It's not just during an election cycle. It really is year-round advocacy that you can do with these 5 buckets to talk about any policy issue that is important to you, important to your community, and important to our state. All right, does anybody have any questions? I really did have one more slide. It doesn't want to go, but I promise there's one more slide. And it's just my contact information. Okay, well that's it. Let's see. Yes, in the back. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I have just a broad question for you about what a typical day looks like for you and how you are staying abreast on all of the information.
Woo! Okay, that's a great question.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, so her question was, what does a typical day look like for me? I'm actually part-time at the food bank, so every day can look a little different, but let's talk about a typical week right now. I usually, as soon as I get up and get logged in, I will usually listen to one of those federal podcasts to see what's going on. Is there something I need to be watching? Did I miss something over the weekend? I'll check my email because, again, I belong to all of these listservs. I'm checking to see if there's any sort of legislation at the federal or state level that the groups I am connected with are interested in. If it's a Monday, typically I will do bill review for the 5 food banks. Right now I'm over a SNAP grant for all 5 food banks in Tennessee. And I do bill review of all the state legislatures' bills that might be in committee, it might be heard on the floor. I run a bill list for them and I get that out to them. And then, depending on the rest of the week, like last week, I had a legislative breakfast at Meadowview and got to talk to several of the elected officials. Senator Haggerty is supposed to be here on Thursday for an event at Meadowview, so I'll be attending that with my boss. Next week, Monday, I will leave in the morning and go to Nashville because next week is a Day at the Hill week for me. And I will pick up another food banker. We will go to Nashville. We're going to go to the House session on Monday in person. And then we'll have meetings all day on Tuesday. Wednesday, there's a breakfast on the school lunch bill. We're inviting elected officials to come in and talk about that with Tennessee Justice. So it's every day is a little different, and I think that's why I love it, because it's sometimes it's a little crazy, and then I have to do reports. Feeding America likes reports. Like the first week of May, we're going to be doing a Hill visit to DC, so my boss and another employee and I will be in DC meeting with Haggerty's people. And that is 2 things I would love to tell you about. If you go to Nashville and you want to meet with elected officials, email their offices and request or call to get a time. But if you want to watch the Senate or the House in session live, call your elected official. There is a website and you can request tickets for free, and you get a seating assignment in the galleries, and then they'll email you a ticket so you can show it to the Tennessee Highway Patrol and the guards there at the door so you can get in to the gallery. And the same thing, if you go to Washington, D.C. and you want to meet with folks, it is sometimes really hard to get a one-on-one with representatives, Harshbarger, or with our senators. But our U.S. Senators, Blackburn and Haggerty, host something called Tennessee Tuesdays. And if you're in D.C. on a Tuesday, they're in D.C., you can actually sign up to attend a breakfast. It's from like 8:30 to 10:15, or they'll tell you the times depending on the day. And you'll actually get a chance to see them and very briefly talk to them in those mornings. So those are 2 opportunities I didn't talk about. Those are really more in-person opportunities. But are great things to do if you have the ability to be in DC and would like to meet with them and it's Tuesdays, Tennessee Tuesdays. It's easy to remember. Does that help? I mean, it's kind of all over the place, but that's kind of What else? Yes.
I think I can talk pretty loudly.
Okay.
Okay. My question, 1, let me say I appreciate so much what you are doing. You're speaking to the right kind of a group who can hear the message and who maybe will help do something about it. But what I see in my everyday life is John Q. Citizen somewhere who spends, maybe we're lucky, and he spends 5 minutes a day watching NBC. Or he has a favorite podcaster that he goes to, if he even goes that far. Where is the power in this nation? It's in the voters. That's what changes everything. And we advocate getting out the vote, which is great. But it's not only getting out the vote, it's getting out the voter
Yes.
that is informed on who are the people who are going to help them. And unfortunately, most of them are not going to go anywhere, do anything. They're going to listen to a friend, and I'm talking people, maybe a lady who comes and helps us in our house cleaning, and she says something once a week, and she says something that leads you to believe, man, she heard that on the internet. It is really not what's happening.
So
I try to say something and talk to those people. What do we do day to day? How do we take the person who doesn't care enough to vote, to register, or do anything else? How do we get any information to them?
So
to say, who would you vote, who should you vote for?
Sure. So that is one of the things that we've tried to do at Second Harvest. We actually have had. Yes, I'm sorry. The question is, how do we help those around us? Trying to concisely say it. Learn who is up for re-election and how to learn about their platforms and how to learn how to educate themselves before they go into the voter box. That is one of the things that we've done at Second Harvest. We had some of the slides you noticed said NEAT training. We have actually been working with our neighbors, and one of the slides I did not put in this presentation because you are the League of Voters, is actually one of the slides is about going and how to register and how to find out if you are registered to vote, where do you go vote, and then educating yourself about these individuals. So what I would challenge everyone here to do is when you are talking, that's back to that community engagement piece, talking to people if you think they might not be registered. You know, challenge your friends to be registered. If it's a bad weather day, you know, offer to go take them to the polls. A lot of times people don't vote because of the weather or they don't have transportation. You know, trying to see the barriers that your friends may have to getting out to vote and helping address that. But again, I think just being aware of the issues and trying to elevate general education of the folks that you're with. And here's the thing, we can't make people vote, you know, but what we can do is we can encourage them and we can help try to make them as educated as they can be so they can make an informed decision. And it may not be the decision we would make in the voter box, but as long as they have put forth the time and effort to try to figure out what that individual would do for them and their community, and they believe they are making the right decision for them, then we've done our job.
So I would like, I don't know whether this, can you hear me, anybody? Okay.
I can hear you.
All right, so Julia in the front there is, Julia Thompson-Musson is leading our voter services. So I still want to put a plug in for Vote 411, okay? That's the league, let's say asset, to Jack's point, let's say showing up with no knowledge of what the issues are and where the candidates stand is a real challenge, a real gap. And this year, I think they've changed some of their requirements. A lot of people won't respond to the surveys. They're allowing us to put, if they have a social media page or a website this year, they're allowing us to put that on there. So it's a one-stop shop for the people that are very challenged having enough time, a one-stop shop to be able to go listen to the site to research that. So I just want to put
I think that's great. And that's another thing you can do via social media too, is you can, it sounds like that's probably got a social media site that you could post on your social media. And you know, one thing I've always done, just about every time when I remember to do it, I get the sticker that says I voted, I take a picture, and that is usually my profile picture on Facebook. And I usually challenge people I know. So that's something very easy you could do. When you vote, early voting is a great time to do it because then you've got the entire early voting period to have your Facebook profile reminding people. And then on your social media, if you're on LinkedIn or all of those things, you could put forth information about the candidates. If there's an article in the newspaper that has information that candidates have posted. I know here in Johnson City, the chamber usually tries to do the questionnaires and post them on their Facebook page, I think their website, and in the newspaper. So I would encourage you to cross-post some of those educational resources and get those out to a broader public that may not know to look at the newspaper for it. Yes.
I just have a question. I appreciate your enthusiasm and your thoroughness. It's wonderful. It's inspiring. One of the things we often hear is people feel like what they do won't really matter.
Yes.
You addressed this a little bit at the beginning in terms of voices amplifying one another. But in terms of feeling like my position is not the majority position in Tennessee, or this issue has not risen to receive a lot of attention, what do you say to people to keep their spirits up, to keep their motivation up? How do you keep your motivation up? You know, what are successes we can build on?
That's a great question. And I will say, probably the lowest I have felt as an advocate in the 8 years I've been at the food bank was last November. when we were in the middle of the government shutdown and no one seemed to care. And every time I turned on the news, it sounded like nobody seemed to care, that we had hungry people. And we were trying so hard to get the governor to do something. We didn't know what it was going to be. And for me, we wrote a letter. And that is another thing I do on a daily basis. I respond to emails, I write letters, we work on different kinds of media posts, kind of anything that has to do around our advocacy efforts. I may be writing something, but that was one of the things we did. We wrote a letter, and I didn't think it would go anywhere. And we got a call from the governor's staff asking if we would have a call with them to talk about what SNAP meant. And while I felt the most discouraged I had been in so many days, it also, I realized that letter, they heard me. Now, did that mean they were going to do what I wanted? Maybe not. But at least they were saying, I will sit down and listen to what you have to say and listen to the concerns of our neighbors. And within, I had that call on a Friday, and on Tuesday the governor said he was going to give $500,000 to the food banks for food. Was it our ask? No. But it was something. And it made me realize our voice had been heard. And so I think you have to look for the small wins. So it may not be that the piece of legislation you wanted gets passed, but it may be that your neighbor sat down and talked to you about it and made a phone call on behalf of it. So, we have to take our wins where we can. And I think those small incremental things are what keeps me charged. When we have a delegate from Northeast Tennessee that agrees to sponsor a bill that I would have thought 5 years ago no one would have touched with a 10-foot pole, that gives me energy. That excites me because it means people are listening. And while it may not ultimately pass, I know I've done everything I can to make sure that school meal bill passes or that summer EBT gets across the finish line because I've done everything I can do. And so I know that is a little discouraging that you don't always see the wins, but take the small wins where you can and get energy and excitement from that. Because again, that one heart or one mind that you turn today, they may turn 3 or 4 minds tomorrow. They may ultimately be that grass top person you don't know, and their uncle is the person you need to pass the bill at the federal level, and you would have never known that. But you shared your message with somebody who knew them, who, that 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon thing, that's real. Believe in Kevin Bacon. What else?
Okay, we've got one more.
Okay, I'm here for it.
Okay, sorry, it's not a question, it's an announcement.
Oh, okay.
Before we wrap up.
I'm Frankie Wolf, and I am on the nomination committee for this year's slate, along with Diana Mosen and Kathy Benedetto, and I'm not sure they're here today. But we need names of people who are interested in one of the offices, and I have information. If anybody wants that, I can send it to them. We already have some names, but we need more. So if you know someone, or if you are interested in being on the slate, please let one of us know.
Okay. Any additional questions for Cecile? Anybody?
Okay.
All right. Well, I would like to thank Cecile for joining us today. Let's all give her a round of applause. It's been a tremendous. Listen, you'll get the presentation. We'll get that. Cecile and cascade that to everyone. Some great resources in here listed, and I just hope we can all aspire. Where do you pick? Listed your poison or your passion. Okay, listen. So I just want to thank her again, and thank you guys. And please, there's plenty of food. In fact, please pick up some of those. There's a one-pager on the SAVE Act that already has both Tennessee and Virginia listed senators at the bottom and their local offices. Phone numbers. Please call about the SAVE Act. There's some other legislation listed pending, listed advocacy issues locally. So please pick up those flyers in the back. Thank you guys for coming.